Ever stopped and thought, like really thought, about how satisfied you are with your whole college experience?
I mean, not just like, oh, college is cool kind of vibe, but a deeper dive into what's making you feel that way.
Exactly. We're talking about that kind of gut level evaluation of the quality of your college life,
Mm.
specifically at your school, at that particular institution.
And you know what's wild? This whole satisfaction thing, it's not just some fluffy feeling. It can actually pack a punch, academically speaking.
Really? Tell me more about that.
Well, studies have found a pretty solid connection between how satisfied students are and their GPA. And get this, it seems like satisfaction might actually be a bigger factor in shaping your grades than your grades are in shaping your satisfaction.
Oh, hold on. So you're saying my overall happiness with the whole college experience could actually drive my grades more than just getting good marks?
That's what the research suggests. It's almost like if you're genuinely happy and engaged with your college experience, those good grades might just naturally fall.
Fascinating. So it's not just about hitting the books and acing exams. It's about that bigger picture.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you're thriving, both academically and personally, within that specific college environment.
And it goes beyond just grades, right? I
Hmm.
mean, satisfaction probably plays a big role in whether students decide to stick it out or jump ship.
Absolutely. If a student isn't feeling it, they're more likely to consider transferring or even dropping out altogether. Now, there are always exceptions. If students' options are limited, they might stay put even if they're not exactly over the moon.
Makes sense. But generally speaking, it's safe to say that happy students tend to stay enrolled.
Right. But beyond these practical considerations, there's a bigger point here. Back in '77, this guy Aston made a really interesting argument. He said that a student's level of happiness and satisfaction with their college years shouldn't be viewed as some sort of afterthought, secondary to those concrete achievements.
So it's not just about getting that degree or landing that dream job after graduation.
It's about the whole experience. It's about those formative years and how they shape you as an individual.
Right. And today, we're really diving deep into the heart of this satisfaction thing. We're not just skimming the surface, looking at things like your background or what the college brochure says.
No, we're going way beyond those typical factors. We're cracking open this fascinating concept called a judgment model of college satisfaction.
A judgment model. Sounds intriguing.
It was developed by these researchers, Akun and Weir, back in 1990. What makes this model so cool is that it focuses on the mental gymnastics students go through as they're evaluating their college experience. It's all about those inference processes, how students actually make sense of their daily lives on campus.
So this less about the external factors and more about how students are processing those experiences internally.
Precisely. We're going beyond those simple correlations and digging into the nitty-gritty of how those cognitive wheels are turning.
This is getting exciting. What's the game plan for our deep dive today? What do we want our listeners to take away from this?
Today's mission is to equip you with a deeper, more nuanced understanding of what truly drives student satisfaction in college. We're going to do that by peering into those mental processes they use to evaluate their experience. We want to move beyond those surface level connections and explore the complex interplay of factors that contribute to that overall feeling of satisfaction.
All right, let's kick things off by getting clear on what we even mean by college satisfaction. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? But when you look closer, researchers have actually tackled this concept in different ways.
Yeah, it's not quite as simple as it seems. Some folks define it as a general sense of contentment with your college life, just feeling good about the whole experience.
Kind of like that warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you're surrounded by friends on a sunny day on campus.
Exactly. But others see it as a more active process, like you're consciously evaluating your educational journey, weighing the pros and cons. It's more of a subjective evaluation.
So it's not just about basking in the glow of college life. It's about actively assessing how well it's meeting your expectations and needs.
Now, Okun and Weir, whose research we're really honing in on today, they take a slightly different approach. They say college satisfaction is your cognitive evaluation of your experience at a particular institution. And that word particular is super important here.
So it's not just about enjoying being a student in general. It's about how you feel about that specific college you've chosen.
Right on. You could absolutely love the idea of higher education, be thrilled about learning and expanding your horizons, but still find yourself really unhappy at a specific college if it's not the right fit.
That makes a lot of sense. I remember feeling that way about high school. I loved the idea of learning, but my specific high school wasn't really doing it for me.
Exactly. The context really matters. And some of those early attempts to measure satisfaction kind of missed that nuance. They focused more on the general role of being a student rather than the experience at a particular place.
Like they were asking, do you enjoy being a student? Rather than, do you enjoy being a student at this college?
Precisely. And that's where things can get really interesting. There's this ongoing debate about what exactly students are evaluating when they're asked about satisfaction. Are they thinking about their overall life satisfaction? Or is it more about their satisfaction with specific areas of their life, like college, their job if they have one, their relationships?
Or are they zooming in even further, thinking about specific facets of their college experience, like the social scene, the quality of the teaching, the facilities, all those pieces of the puzzle?
It's a complex landscape, and research suggests that your overall satisfaction with college isn't just a simple sum of how you feel about each individual part. It's more about how you weigh those different aspects in relation to each other.
So two students could have completely different experiences and still report the same level of overall satisfaction.
Exactly. One student might be killing it academically but struggling to make friends, while another student might have a vibrant social life but feel overwhelmed by their coursework. And they could both end up feeling equally satisfied with their college experience overall, just for different reasons.
Okay, so how do researchers actually try to capture this complex feeling of college satisfaction? What tools do they use to measure it?
Well, the most popular one out there is the College Student Satisfaction Questionnaire, often called the CSSQ.
CSSQ.
Got it. This tool has been around for a while, actually. It was developed way back in the late 60s, and it drew inspiration from research on job satisfaction.
Interesting. So they figured, hey, if we can measure how satisfied people are with their jobs, maybe we can adapt those ideas to see how happy students are with their college experience.
Exactly. And the CSSQ breaks down satisfaction into 5 key areas. First up, you've got compensation. This one looks at the balance between what you put into your studies, all that effort, and what you get out of it. Your grades, your learning, your overall growth.
It's about whether students feel like they're getting a fair return on their investment, so to speak.
Right. Then there's social life, which covers all those opportunities to connect with other students, build friendships, and get involved in activities outside the classroom.
Because college isn't just about hitting the books. It's about that whole social experience, finding your people and building those connections that can last a lifetime.
Absolutely. And then you've got working conditions, which focuses on the physical environment. Things like the quality of the dorms, the study spaces, the library, even the food.
Because let's be real, a cozy dorm room and a decent cafeteria can make a world of difference.
It's all part of creating a positive and supportive learning environment. And then there's recognition, which looks at how valued and respected students feel by both faculty and their peers.
It's about feeling seen, acknowledged, and appreciated for who you are and what you contribute.
Right. Feeling like you belong. And finally, there's quality of education. This one zeroes in on those academic aspects that help students grow intellectually.
So it's about whether students feel like they're being challenged, stimulated, and encouraged to think critically.
Exactly. And the neat thing about the CSSQ is that you can add up how students rate their satisfaction in each of these 5 areas to get an overall satisfaction score.
So it's like a holistic view of how students are feeling about their college experience.
And research has actually shown that the CSSQ is pretty reliable in predicting things like whether a student is likely to stay enrolled.
So if a student scores high on the CSSQ, they're more likely to stick around and finish their degree.
Right. But it's important to note that the CSSQ isn't the only game in town. Researchers have come up with other ways to measure satisfaction, including questionnaires with multiple questions and even single-item scales that ask students to rate their overall satisfaction with just one question.
So there's a whole toolbox of methods out there.
But here's where things get a little, well, tricky. Much like those early efforts to understand job satisfaction, a lot of these measures of college satisfaction were developed without a strong theoretical foundation.
So they were kind of shooting in the dark, hoping to hit something meaningful.
In a way, yeah. They created these questionnaires without a clear framework for why certain things might make a student satisfied or dissatisfied. It was more like, let's ask a bunch of questions and see what patterns emerge.
So they were collecting data without a solid understanding of what they were actually measuring.
Precisely. And what's the big deal with this theory-free approach? Well, it makes it hard to be sure that we're really capturing what we're aiming for. We might be getting scores, but we don't necessarily know what those scores truly represent in terms of a student's overall experience.
So we might be mistaking correlation for causation, Just because two things are related doesn't mean one is causing the other.
Exactly. And that's where the need for a more robust theoretical framework comes in. So before this judgment model we've been talking about came along, what were researchers thinking about college satisfaction?
Well, one influential model was proposed by a researcher named Spady back in 1970. He saw satisfaction as this crucial factor in whether students decide to stay in college or leave.
Spady was all about that. He called it student persistence, and he saw satisfaction as a major player in that decision-making process.
And he argued that social integration, that feeling of belonging and being connected to the college community, has a direct impact on how satisfied students are.
Yeah, that sense of belonging, of finding your tribe, it's huge. It's like you're not just attending classes, you're part of something bigger, something meaningful.
Right. And Spady also suggested that other things, like how well your personal values align with the university's values, the quality of your relationships with faculty and peers, your intellectual growth, and your academic performance, indirectly influence your satisfaction by affecting that sense of social integration.
So it's all interconnected. Those academic and social factors all feed into that sense of belonging, which ultimately shapes your overall satisfaction.
And when Spady first put his ideas to the test back in '71, what did he find?
Well, he discovered that social integration, how intellectually stimulating students found their coursework, and their grades were the strongest predictors of their overall satisfaction.
So it was a mix of social and academic factors, all contributing to that feeling of contentment.
But here's what's really interesting. The strongest predictors, those feelings of fitting in socially and feeling intellectually challenged, were based on students' subjective experiences, not objective facts.
So it wasn't just about how many friends they had or what their GPA was. It was about how they felt about those things.
Exactly. And apart from GPA, those objective factors, things like how often students interacted with professors outside of class or their family's socioeconomic status, they didn't strongly predict how satisfied students were.
So it was less about those external, measurable factors and more about the internal, personal experience.
Right. And this pattern continued to pop up in later research. A study by Gilo and Lee in the late 80s found that things like the size of the university or a student's high school grades only explained a small part of why students were satisfied with their social and academic lives in college.
And Pike's study in '89, which used some pretty sophisticated statistical methods, even suggested that GPA isn't a very strong predictor of overall college satisfaction.
So the big takeaway from all this research was that a student's background, the concrete aspects of the college environment, and even those measurable outcomes like grades, they all seem to have a relatively weak connection to their satisfaction levels.
It's almost like those objective factors are just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. It's the subjective experiences, the feelings, the personal interpretations that seem to be driving the boat when it comes to satisfaction.
But this raises a really important question, doesn't it? If we're relying so much on subjective feelings like sense of belonging to predict satisfaction, are we potentially muddying the waters?
Are we chasing our tails, so to speak?
Yeah. As Straub pointed out in his research on job satisfaction, these subjective measures of something we think causes satisfaction might actually just be another way of measuring satisfaction itself.
It's like using circular logic. We're using a feeling to predict a feeling.
Like asking someone if they feel happy at their job to predict if they are satisfied with their job. The question is practically begging for the answer.
Exactly. It's tautological. And then there's this whole other layer of complexity. We have to consider the possibility that other deeper factors are at play here.
Like those hidden variables that are pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Right. For example, a student's confidence in their academic abilities could influence both how they perceive their intellectual growth and their overall satisfaction with college.
So when we see a strong link between feeling intellectually stimulated and being satisfied, it might actually be this underlying academic self-confidence that's driving both of those things.
Exactly. It's like this hidden variable that's influencing both the cause and the effect.
So we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions based on surface-level correlations.
Absolutely. We have to dig deeper, think more critically, and consider those underlying factors that might be influencing the whole equation.
So this brings us back to that central puzzle we mentioned earlier. Why are those objective factors, the things we can easily count and measure, such weak predictors of how satisfied students are with college?
And that's where this judgment model swoops in to save the day, offering a fresh perspective on this whole satisfaction conundrum.
I'm ready to have my mind blown. Lay it on me.
All right, let's break it down. The judgment perspective, which hails from the fascinating realm of cognitive psychology, emphasizes that making judgments and evaluations is a fundamental part of how we humans navigate the world.
It's like our brains are constantly sizing things up, making comparisons and drawing conclusions.
Exactly. Think about it. Almost every interaction, every decision we make involves some kind of judgment, whether it's about ourselves, the people around us, or the situations we find ourselves in.
From should I eat that last slice of pizza
Mhm.
to is this the right career path for me? It's all judgments all the time.
And researchers Wire and Carlston, they really dove into this process of judgment formation, breaking it down into 4 key steps.
Right, give me the steps.
Step 1, encoding and interpretation. This is where our brains take in all that sensory information from the world around us and try to make sense of it. It's about creating meaning from those raw signals.
So it's like our brains are taking in all this data and trying to figure out what it all means, how it sits into our existing understanding of the world.
Right. And the way we interpret information can be influenced by all sorts of things, our past experiences, our beliefs, our expectations.
So 2 students could witness the same event on campus, but walk away with completely different interpretations.
Precisely. For example, imagine a professor praises a student's work in class. One student might interpret that praise as genuine and feel a boost of confidence, but another student, who's maybe a little more insecure, might compare themselves to other students and wonder if the professor is just trying to be encouraging.
So the same piece of information can be perceived very differently depending on the individual's internal landscape.
Right. And that leads us to step 2, identification of implications. This is where our brains start drawing conclusions from the information we've processed.
It's like our brains are playing detective, trying to connect the dots and figure out why things are happening the way they are.
Exactly. We're trying to figure out the causes of events to understand why things unfolded the way they did.
And this is where things like attributions come into play, right? Whether we see events as being caused by internal factors like our own effort or external factors like luck or the difficulty of a task.
Spot on. Those attributions, those explanations we come up with, they can have a huge impact on how we feel about ourselves and our experiences.
And how we approach future challenges.
Exactly. So, if a student bombs a test and attributes that failure to a lack of effort, they might be more motivated to study harder next time. But if they attribute that failure to a lack of ability, they might feel discouraged and give up.
So those internal judgments can have a real impact on our behavior.
They can shape our entire outlook on life.
Okay, what's step 3?
Step 3 is integration of implications. This is where our brains take all those individual conclusions we've drawn and try to combine them into a coherent overall judgment.
So it's like putting together a puzzle, trying to fit all the pieces together to form a complete picture.
And sometimes those pieces fit together neatly, and sometimes they clash.
Especially when we have both positive and negative conclusions to contend with.
Right. And this is where things can get really messy. Our brains might rely on mental shortcuts, those heuristics we mentioned earlier, to simplify the process.
Like those rules of thumb that help us make quick judgments without having to overthink every little detail.
Exactly. And our current mood can also throw a wrench in the works, influencing how we evaluate information, even if that mood has nothing to do with the judgment at hand.
So if I'm having a bad day, I might be more likely to view my college experience negatively, even if nothing has actually changed.
Right, unless you're aware of that mood and how it might be coloring your judgment.
Which is easier said than done.
Right? It takes practice and self-awareness. And research suggests that the order in which we consider information can also influence our overall judgment.
So if I think about my awesome social life first, and then my less than stellar GPA, my overall satisfaction might be higher than if I considered those things in reverse order.
That's the idea. Those early pieces of information can carry more weight in our overall judgment.
Fascinating. So the order in which we process information can actually influence our conclusions.
It can have a real impact. And finally, we reach step 4, response selection. This is where we translate that internal judgment into an actual response.
So it's about taking that internal feeling and expressing it in some way, whether it's through our words, our actions, or even just a simple rating on a survey.
Precisely. And the context in which we're asked to express our judgment can influence how we respond.
Like if I'm asked to rate my satisfaction with college in front of my professor, I might be less likely to express any negative feelings.
Right. Especially if I'm hoping for a letter of recommendation from that professor.
But if I'm filling out an anonymous survey, I might feel more comfortable being honest, even if it means giving a lower rating.
Exactly. And that's why researchers have to be really careful about how they measure satisfaction. The context can have a big impact on the results.
Okay, so we've got these 4 steps of judgment formation, but what about the information processing aspects? You mentioned attention and memory earlier. How do those fit into the equation?
Well, they're like the unsung heroes of cognition. They influence every step of the judgment process. Attention shapes what information we notice, what we focus on, and what we filter out.
Like a spotlight that illuminates certain aspects of our experience while leaving others in the shadows.
Precisely. And memory plays a crucial role in how we interpret new information, how we draw conclusions, and how we form overall judgments. Our past experiences, our memories, they provide the context for how we make sense of the present.
It's like our brains are constantly comparing new information to what we already know,
Mm.
trying to find patterns and make connections.
Right. And there are individual differences in how much people enjoy engaging in effortful thinking, what researchers call need for cognition. Some people, they relish those mental challenges. They love to dive deep and analyze complex information.
They're like those puzzle enthusiasts who can spend hours piecing together a 1,000-piece jigsaw.
Exactly. They thrive on those cognitive workouts. But other people, they prefer to conserve their mental energy. They might rely more on their gut feelings, their intuitions, or their current mood when making judgments.
So, if I have a high need for cognition, I might be more likely to carefully consider all the different aspects of my college experience before deciding how satisfied I am. But if I have a low need for cognition, I might just go with my gut feeling.
Right, and that can have a real impact on how objective factors like GPA relate to satisfaction. If I'm not really thinking deeply about my academic performance, that GPA might not carry as much weight in my overall judgment of my college experience.
So attention and memory, they're like those behind-the-scenes stage managers orchestrating the whole judgment process.
They're the unsung heroes that make the whole cognitive show possible.
This is also fascinating. So Okun and Weir, they took all these ideas from cognitive psychology, all this research on judgment formation and information processing, and they applied it to the specific context of college satisfaction.
And they created this really cool model, almost like a roadmap of how students navigate their college experience and arrive at that overall judgment of satisfaction.
So they started by identifying the inputs, the basic building blocks that students use to form their judgments about satisfaction. What did they come up with?
Well, they propose that these inputs are primarily the objective outcomes of a student's time in college.
So it's about those measurable things, those concrete experiences that students can point to.
Exactly. And based on those different aspects covered by the CSSQ, what previous research had uncovered, and wanting to avoid those tricky subjective measures, they landed on 4 key objective outcomes.
Okay, lay them on me.
All right, first up for compensation. Remember, that's about the balance between effort and results. They propose using semester GPA as a measurable way to capture that dynamic.
So it's about how well students are doing academically.
Right. Then, for social life, they kept it simple, suggesting the number of college friends a student has as a decent indicator of social connectedness.
Because having a solid group of friends can make a big difference in how you experience college.
Absolutely. And for recognition, that feeling of being valued and respected, they propose looking at how often a student has contact with faculty outside of scheduled classes.
So it's about those interactions that go beyond the classroom, those moments where students feel seen and appreciated by their professors.
Right. Those informal interactions can be really powerful in fostering a sense of belonging and intellectual stimulation.
And finally, for quality of education, they suggested tracking the number of non-health-related absences from classes.
Because if students are engaged and feeling like they're getting something out of their courses, they're less likely to skip class.
It's like a proxy for how intellectually stimulating and valuable students are finding their academic experience.
Exactly. So they've got these 4 objective outcomes, these concrete data points that they're using as the raw material for their judgment model.
And then they take each of those steps in the judgment process we talked about, encoding, identifying implications, integrating implications, and response selection. And they explore all those factors that might influence how those objective outcomes relate to a student's overall satisfaction with college.
It's like they're creating a detailed map of the cognitive landscape, highlighting all those potential detours and roadblocks along the way.
I'm ready for the grand tour. Where do we start?
Well, let's begin with encoding and interpreting information. Remember, this is where those social comparisons come into play. We humans are social creatures. We're constantly sizing ourselves up in relation to others.
We're wired to compare, to see where we stand in the pecking order.
And in the context of college, students are no different. They're comparing themselves to other students, trying to figure out how they measure up academically, socially, and in all those other domains that matter to them.
And those comparisons, they help us set standards for ourselves. We create these benchmarks based on how we perceive others are doing.
Right. And research suggests that those standards play a huge role in how satisfied we are in different areas of our lives. If our actual outcomes fall short of our standards, we're likely to feel dissatisfied.
It's like setting a goal and then falling short. That discrepancy can be a real downer.
And the thing is, those standards can be really subjective and fluid. They can shift depending on who we're comparing ourselves to and how we interpret those comparisons.
So two students with the same GPA could have completely different levels of satisfaction depending on who they're using as their reference point.
Exactly. If one student is constantly comparing themselves to their friend who's acing every class and aiming for med school, they're probably going to feel less satisfied with their own B average than a student who's comparing themselves to their friend who's struggling to keep their head above water.
So it's not just about the objective reality, it's about how we perceive that reality in relation to others.
And there was this really cool study that illustrates this point perfectly. Researchers gave students hypothetical test scores and told them how other students had performed on that same test.
So they were manipulating the social comparison information, creating different contexts for how students would evaluate their own scores.
Exactly. And what they found was that the same test score led to different levels of satisfaction depending on whether most other students had done really well or really poorly.
So if I got a 70 on a test and everyone else got an 80, I'd probably feel pretty bummed. But if everyone else got a 60, I'd be stoked with my 70.
Exactly. It's all relative. If everyone else bombed the test, even a mediocre score can feel like a victory.
So our satisfaction isn't just determined by our own performance, it's also shaped by how we perceive we're doing compared to others.
And that brings us to step 2, identification of implications. Remember, this is where those causal attributions come into play.
It's about how we explain our successes and failures, whether we attribute them to internal factors like our own effort or ability, or external factors like luck or the difficulty of a task.
Right, and there's a whole theory about this called attribution theory, which suggests that we tend to explain outcomes based on 3 key dimensions: locus, stability, and controllability.
Okay, break those down for me.
Locus refers to whether we see the cause as internal or external. Stability is about whether we believe the cause is likely to stay the same or change over time. And controllability is about whether we feel like we have any power over the cause.
So if I ace a test, I could attribute that success to internal factors, like my awesome study habits, which are stable over time and controllable by me. Or I could attribute it to external factors, like the professor giving an easy test, which is unstable and uncontrollable.
Exactly. And those different attributions, they can have a big impact on how we feel about ourselves and our accomplishments.
So if I attribute my success to internal, stable, and controllable factors, I'm going to feel pretty good about myself. But if I attribute it to external, unstable, and uncontrollable factors, it's not going to boost my self-esteem nearly as much.
Right. And research has shown that those internal attributions for success, they tend to lead to more positive emotions and higher levels of satisfaction.
Because we feel like we're in the driver's seat, like we're responsible for our own success.
Exactly. And conversely, if we attribute our failures to internal, stable, and uncontrollable factors like I'm just not smart enough, that can really damage our self-esteem and
And
motivation.
it can lead to those feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, like we're stuck and there's nothing we can do about it.
And that's why it's so important to cultivate those growth mindsets, to believe that our abilities are malleable and that we can improve with effort and practice.
Because if we believe we can change, we're more likely to persevere in the face of challenges and achieve our goals.
Exactly. So back to college satisfaction. Okun and Weir suggest that those causal attributions students make for their academic successes and failures, they can play a big role in how satisfied they are with their overall college experience.
So a student who attributes their good grades to their own hard work and dedication is likely to feel more satisfied than a student who attributes those same good grades to luck or an easy professor.
Right. And conversely, a student who attributes their poor grades to a lack of effort is less likely to feel satisfied than a student who attributes those same poor grades to external factors, like a really tough professor or a difficult course.
So those internal attributions for both successes and failures, they seem to be key players in this satisfaction game.
They're shaping how students interpret their experiences and how they feel about themselves within that college context.
Okay, so we've encoded the information, we've drawn our conclusions. Now what?
Now we move on to step 3, integration of implications. This is where our brains take all those individual conclusions, all those positive and negative bits of information, and try to combine them into a coherent overall judgment.
So it's like taking all those puzzle pieces and trying to fit them together to create a complete picture.
But sometimes those pieces don't fit so neatly. Sometimes they clash, they contradict each other, and our brains have to work overtime to reconcile those discrepancies.
Especially when we're dealing with complex issues like college satisfaction, where there are so many factors at play.
Exactly. And to make this process a little more manageable, our brains might rely on those mental shortcuts, those heuristics we talked about earlier.
Like those rules of thumb that help us simplify complex information and make quicker judgments.
Right. And our current mood can also sneak in and influence how we weigh different pieces of information, even if that mood is totally unrelated to the judgment at hand.
So if I'm feeling stressed about an upcoming exam, I might be more likely to focus on the negative aspects of my college experience and downplay the positive ones.
Exactly. Unless you're aware of that mood and how it might be skewing your judgment.
Which again is easier said than done.
It takes practice. And research on how we form impressions of others suggests that we might not give equal weight to every piece of information.
So some information might carry more weight than others in our overall judgment.
Right. And there's this thing called the primacy effect, which suggests that information we encounter early on tends to have a bigger impact on our overall impression than information we encounter later.
So if I first hear about a college's awesome social scene, and then hear about its demanding academic program, that initial positive impression might stick with me, even though the academic rigor might be a deal breaker for me.
Exactly. Those first impressions, they can be powerful. And conversely, there's something called the recency effect, which suggests that information we encounter last can also have a disproportionate impact on our judgment.
So if I'm trying to decide between two colleges, and the last college I visit has an amazing library, that might sway my decision, even though the other college might have been a better fit overall.
Right, those last pieces of information can really stick with us. And then there's something called the halo effect, which is this tendency to let one positive trait influence our overall evaluation of someone or something.
So if I meet a really friendly student at a college fair, I might be more likely to view that college favorably overall, even though that student's friendliness might not be representative of the entire student body.
Exactly. It's like that one positive trait casts a halo over everything else. And conversely, there's something called the horn effect, which is
Yeah.
the